Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Christopher Nolan film Oppenheimer. And the thing with Oppenheimer is I'm a really big Christopher Nolan fan. And so anytime he wants to take on a new genre, a different kind of film, or anything like that, I always get really excited as one of his fans of his. I just really always admire when he wants to tackle a new genre or take on something new for his filmography. I just really am a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I love the Dark Knight trilogy and Inception and Interstellar and Dunkirk and Tenet and almost everything the man's made I've really, really loved. And so anytime he releases a new movie, I get really excited. I just absolutely love the way Christopher Nolan makes his movies. And so here we are. He's doing a biopic movie about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the atomic bomb. And so in this movie, you guys, it's essentially three different parts of Oppenheimer's life in one movie. There's one about how he got recruited for the bomb, and the steps and him being a physicist and how people kind of noticed him for his knowledge. Then there's the actual story of the atomic bomb himself, how he got it made, how he had to recruit people, how he got people interested in even working on it with him. And then you have the story after that of the aftermath of the stuff that he went through psychologically, the stuff that he found out the government was going to use the atomic bomb for, how President Truman had plans for the bomb, and how this kind of psychologically messed with him, and all these court stuff he had, all this stuff about working with communists, and all this stuff that unfortunately got him in trouble a little bit. But at the same time, kind of the aftermath of just how much the government wanted to have this weapon in their arsenal in case the next war were to break out, and how there was decisions made regarding what they ended up doing with this bomb and things like that. And so all of this happens over the course of Oppenheimer. We get three significant parts of his life. We get to see the psychological side of him and how he kind of handled everything. How his wife felt about it, how his mistress felt about it, since he unfortunately did have a mistress as well at the time that all this was happening. So we get to see all the stuff in Oppenheimer's life. We get to see not really like his childhood or anything like that, but I would say those three big moments are very much explored here. This is a 3-hour movie, so they spend a lot of time with all three of those key points in his life, and so that happens over the course of Oppenheimer. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed this film a lot. As a Christopher Nolan fan, I was very happy with what he put on the screen. Definitely not, he's used to doing a lot of like action-oriented scripts. It was kind of nice to see him kind of do something a little bit different for once. There is a lot of bag of tricks that he normally brings to the table as far as Christopher Nolan is concerned. There's, all the stuff that he likes to do, like non-linear storytelling and things like that. He definitely brings that to the table again. He uses black and white footage and footage that's in color to kind of speak on certain things. I think he said some of the stuff in color is supposed to be the subjective stuff about Oppenheimer's life, and then some of the black and white stuff I think is supposed to be the objective stuff of his life, of kind of how Oppenheimer perceived it and stuff like that. So just once again, really interesting stuff. Really, you can tell Christopher Nolan thinks deep about the way he plans his movies and things like that. So let's go over some positives and negatives, some things I really enjoyed about Oppenheimer, and some things I thought were probably could have been better about it as well. But for my positive of this movie, though, I thought the after effects and the psychology that Oppenheimer faced after the bomb was finished, I thought was extremely well done. You can just tell the poor guy went through so much. He had so much public hate. He just was. There was so much interrogation. There was so much things regarding him working with spies and him working with communists, and all the stuff that was going on in the country that really kind of ripped people apart and kind of made people at war with each other because of these things. Just the psychology that Oppenheimer faced, of what he had to do, how he just couldn't imagine his world just being ripped apart by this bomb, and how almost everything he knew and loved would be gone. And so just the psychological side of it I thought was very powerful in this movie. Just the way that Christopher Nolan handled the psychology of the film I thought was extremely well done. I also like Nolan's sense of tension and fear that he brought to the audience. He always has a great way of building up the tension, building up kind of things that we're going to potentially see once the bomb gets created, how he creates fear in us, and as far as what this bomb can do, what could go wrong with it, just how he builds up tension and how he builds up fear, I thought was extremely well done in this movie. He really brings both of those senses to his filmmaking ability really well in this movie. I also like the scientific and political history that was told behind what happened before the bomb was made, and what all the political and scientific stuff that happened during and after the bomb was created as well. Just really interesting stuff. Really interesting to see kind of all the political stuff that was happening at the time, all the scientific breakthroughs that were happening at the time because of this creation of the bomb and stuff. So really interesting stuff. Usually stuff that I wouldn't normally typically be interested in, but the way Christopher Nolan writes it and directs it and presents it to us, I thought was extremely well done. All the acting performances are very strong across the board with this movie. We get Emily Blunt, we got Cillian Murphy. We had such a huge stack cast in this movie. It's just unbelievable just how much talent Christopher Nolan was able to recruit for this movie. Emily Blunt and Rami Malek and Olivia Thirlby and Gary Oldman and just all these people you never would think you would be able to see in a movie. Robert Downey Jr. and one of the Safdie brothers. It's just so many people that you wouldn't have imagined being teamed up for one movie. Just really, really strong. I thought all the performances across the board were very strong here, and just huge kudos to Christopher Nolan for recruiting all this talent and really getting the best performances out of everybody here. I thought everybody did a terrific job in this movie. I also like how the film depicts how layered Oppenheimer himself was. Very much a layered person. It wasn't just black and white, good and evil. Like the way that the film depicts how Oppenheimer did have a bad part of his life. He had a good part of his life too. He really, at the end, was just kind of recruited to make this really terrible thing for the government that the government clearly didn't make good choices with. I also like how the film depicts how he kind of dealt with grief and all the depression he faced with creating such a bomb and things like that. So I like how the film is very layered. It's not just, oh, Oppenheimer felt this way at this point in his life. He felt this way at this time of his life. It really is much more layered than that. It's much more, they really kind of present everything. They show the good parts of his life, the bad stuff, the stuff of people that were really kind of important to him and kind of got him through and consulted with him on certain things. Albert Einstein is a character in this movie. They show how Einstein kind of made Oppenheimer feel better about certain things as far as how the bomb was made, what power he has left as far as now they have the bomb, what are they going to do with it? How do you feel about it and things like that. So just a lot of layers to this movie. And I always appreciate when a film isn't just about, the simple black and white, yes and no, good and evil stuff. It really is about the layers, about all the good and all the bad explored throughout the movie. For my negatives of this movie, though, unfortunately, Oppenheimer has a very messy sense of story structure. Though the film is presented very well, all three of those parts of his life I mentioned, the getting recruited for the bomb, making the bomb, and all the after effects of the bomb, specifically with the courtroom stuff, it's all kind of meshed together throughout the movie. And because the story is non-linear, we'll have a courtroom scene, an Act 1 scene, an Act 2 scene, an Act 3 scene, Act 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3. It's just like, it keeps going back and forth, and it's just kind of hard to keep up with everything after a while. And like I said, this is a 3-hour runtime, so it really is kind of an exhausting experience as a result. I personally would have had a more traditional approach to how the story would have been structured personally. It's fine if you want to have like maybe a courtroom moment that really tied into something that happens early on in the movie and things like that. But the way Nolan chooses to do it is he'll do courtroom stuff and then Act 1 stuff, Act 2 stuff. Like he'll just kind of throw everything all around. And it does connect. Like they do show like, okay, well, the person they're referring to here is this guy. And so they have like visuals and stuff. But I thought the way the story was structured was a little messy at the end of the day. I personally would have preferred something more traditional. It's fine if, Tenet and Insomnia and all this other stuff has a non-linear story, because those kind of stories I feel kind of are more interesting because of the fact that they choose to be non-linear. I think this time around, because this is a biopic, because a lot of the stuff in this film did happen in real life, I think a more traditional approach to the story structure would have helped this movie a lot, because as we see it here, it is a little messy, unfortunately. Some of the occasional musical score choices I thought were kind of weak too. I would say the second half of the film, Ludwig, if I can pronounce his name right, Ludwig Göransson, I believe is Christopher Nolan's composer in this movie. A lot of the stuff he does in the second half I thought was much stronger in his score than in the first half. So I don't know if it's just musical score choices that I personally would have changed if I was Christopher Nolan directing him as far as what I wanted for the music in the movie and things like that. But I would say that specifically once we get to the bomb and all the stuff after the bomb goes off, I would say that's when the score of this movie really gets more effective to me personally. Anyway, maybe it's just because that's when some of the more emotional moments happen in the movie. But yeah, I would say specifically in the first half, like when we're just getting to know Oppenheimer and how he gets recruited and stuff, some of the musical score choices just weren't my favorite in particular. I think there's even one moment where it's just strictly violins and stuff like that. But just me personally, I don't know if anybody else might have felt that way, but good musical score overall. There's just some choices within the musical score that didn't quite hit for me personally. Some of the visual cues in this film are unfortunately a little unclear as well. Because Christopher Nolan is adapting this story from American Prometheus, which was a book about the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, there's certain stuff about his life where in the book it would just be like a sentence, be like, oh, well, Oppenheimer, his diet was like this and stuff. But in the movie, unfortunately, there's some visual cues where I'm just kind of left with more questions than answers, unfortunately. One big one is throughout the movie, Oppenheimer is always told to eat more food. And it's always like some kind of a fruit, it seems like. So I don't know if the film's trying to tell us that he had a hard time having a diet of any kind because of all the stuff going on with this bomb, or he just had a tough time keeping food down and stuff. So there's just some certain information like that where in a film you got to be more careful with how you present that, because in a book you can just have a sentence be like, oh, well, Oppenheimer's diet wasn't good and stuff. But there's a certain visual cues like that where you just kind of are expected to pick up on it, and Nolan doesn't give you enough context as to what exactly that is. So there's like certain aspects like that, like his diet and stuff, that really is kind of unclear. So certain visual cues for me were just a little unclear as a result, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, like I brought up earlier, this film does have a very, very long runtime. It does get very, very exhausting. There is just so many plot points and storylines that we're expected to follow over the course of 3 hours. And like I said, it's told in non-linear fashion, so they can be an Act 3 scene at the beginning and then an Act 2 scene and then an Act 1 scene and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, it is a very exhausting film to get through. And I don't know if Nolan presented it that way because of all the stuff that Oppenheimer himself was very exhausted by in real life. But at the end of the day, I think a good solid 15-20 minutes could have been trimmed out of this movie, and I think it would have been better. Just kind of getting more to the point of the stuff that really mattered than the story of Oppenheimer. But overall, I enjoyed it for what it was. Just wish the runtime was a little bit shorter, though. I'm going to give Oppenheimer a 9 out of 10. I really, really like this movie. There's tons of things about it that are really, really well done. It's a great Christopher Nolan movie. For me personally, I think The Dark Knight and Inception are probably my still two all-time favorite Christopher Nolan movies. But this film is very good. It definitely has a strong emotional punch to it. Like I said, some negatives along the way, but for the most part, a lot of stuff about this film is extremely well done. So I do highly recommend seeing Oppenheimer. It's a 9 out of 10 for me. I do highly recommend seeing it.